Sounds very close to these are contact logs, but
Let's go.
If you're old enough to have lived through 9/11, you probably just thought to yourself, I remember where I was when I learned the news. It's a moment burned in our memories like JFK's assassination was for those who were around on that day. We all knew a dynamic shift had been made. Once remarkable, the old New York skyline preserved in films and media now marks a time of pre-9/11 innocence. But what really happened? How could it have been avoided? George Bush's simplistic "they hate us for our freedom" explanation doesn't cut it.
They hate our freedoms.
It's a very dark and hard pill to swallow, but there are people of enormous evil and indifference to humanity who are willing to sacrifice the innocent and orchestrate pretexts for wars. It was not their first rodeo. State-sponsored terrorism is not new. Bringing the violence to U.S. soil at this scale shattered the obfuscation that distance provided in the past. Zog had reached a new height of chutzpah. 9/11 was a multinational, jointly conducted covert operation by a U.S., Israeli, and Saudi Arabian intelligence nexus that used an al-Qaeda cell as a battering ram. The plot to ram planes into buildings dated back to at least 1995 by men who had previously attacked the World Trade Center in 1993. Al-Qaeda was not then, now, or ever clearly divorced from covert state sponsorship. Understand this. Realpolitik is dead. Nations do not always act in their national interest. They act for the select personal and commercial interests of the state body. U.S. foreign policy has been driven by Israeli interest for decades.
Israel has run American foreign policy in the Middle East for 30 years. That's how it works. We have an Israel lobby. We have this clean break strategy. We have a plan for 7 wars in 5 years. And what's interesting is they actually kind of carry out this madness. They don't explain any of it to the American people. They don't tell anybody, but you can watch step by step. We've had 6 of those 7 wars. The only one that hasn't happened is Iran. And if you watch every day now, the MSM, the mainstream media, is pushing for U.S. war with Iran. Netanyahu's pushing for war with Iran.
This is not a hypothesis. It is fact. Iraq, Iran, and Libya are racing to develop nuclear weapons. So now what is the next step? I believe that the next step is to choose. It's not a question of whether you have to take action. Choose the right one. But what kind of action and against whom? I think of the 3, Saddam is probably in many ways a linchpin. If you take out Saddam's regime, I guarantee you that it will have enormous positive reverberations on the region.
Right after 9/11, about 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who had used to work for me. And one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, No. He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." So I came back to see him a few weeks later. And by that time, we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today. And he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
Clark is saying already by September 21st, 2001, that they decided to go to war with Iraq. That's only 10 days after 9/11 and only 3 days after anthrax was mailed. The plan was already in motion. By October 20th, they had added the rest of the list. Iraq, Iran, Syria, Libya, and Lebanon had nothing to do with 9/11 or al-Qaeda in 2001. But now al-Qaeda is in Iraq, Syria, and Libya thanks to U.S. intervention. 9/11 catalyzed the Zionist script for war, and the U.S. was sent on a multi-trillion-dollar imperial escapade against Israel's enemies, directly against U.S. national interests. Al-Qaeda attacked on 9/11 because of the U.S.'s Israeli-centric violent foreign policy. Al-Qaeda exists in the first place because of the U.S.'s willingness to foster, finance, and arm radical Islamic fundamentalist proxy forces. All of this war and bloodshed could have been prevented and would have been prevented if it had stopped at previous clandestine fiascos. 2 huge covert operations in the 1980s predicated 9/11. Operation Eagle Claw, better known as Iran-Contra, and Operation Cyclone. Two foreign intelligence agencies were instrumental in working with the U.S. to facilitate these operations: Israel and Saudi Arabia. Operation Cyclone was the birth of Al-Qaeda, then called the Freedom Fighters. The U.S. embarked on a path of fostering, financing, and arming Islamic fundamentalists to fight the Soviets in a proxy war in Afghanistan. In Iran-Contra, the U.S. used proceeds of both contraband sold to Iran by Israel, as well as the illegal narcotics trade, to finance the off-the-books operation in Nicaragua, where tens of thousands of people were killed. This set up a scenario very similar to what was repeated in Syria later under Timber Sycamore. During the Contra affair, on TV, the U.S. would denounce the Contras publicly while covertly arming them privately. In Syria, it was the same thing. The U.S. would denounce ISIS publicly, but finance and arm them privately through cutouts. What we have is a precedent of America, Israel, and Saudi Arabia working together for jointly conducted covert operations. 9/11 involved all of the same players. There is a reason the U.S. used proxy forces, and a reason the CIA sought foreign sources of money laundering for black budgets. The system of rent-a-terrorists was modeled after the old British system of privateering. This system of privateering is exactly how modern terrorist cells work. The United States and other nations pay their terrorist groups such as Al-Qaeda. They'll attack Russians in Afghanistan. They'll attack the Russians in Chechnya. They'll fight for us in Bosnia or Kosovo or Syria, wherever we tell them to, including the United States itself in a false flag operation. If a terrorist is caught and killed, so what? They're just a terrorist. But the fact that the CIA puts them on the payroll means they're our terrorists. They're modern privateers. Domestically, the FBI does this too with dim-witted pawns who they encourage to do an attack, and then they arrest their own asset to justify larger budgets. Sometimes they don't arrest them until after an attack occurs. Then they cry about the need for greater powers of surveillance. We live in the age of terrorism management. The CIA, through USAID and NGOs, has privateers on land, aka terrorist proxies. Iran-Contra, Afghanistan, and Syria are examples of sustained U.S. support for covert mercenary terrorists. 9/11 was a short operation by comparison, and it was intentionally manipulated to manufacture new conflicts.
Get this through your head. Intelligence agencies do not work for the national interest. They have their own ideology, and you're not part of it. They will kill you, they will sponsor killers, and they will lie about all of it. That is how the world works.
Under Operation Eagle Claw, the Contras were involved in rape, executions, and torture. In keeping with the distancing factor of the old British system of privateering, combined with the global arms industry market, the U.S. had no shortage of willing partners to needlessly kill for profit. The fact that it was done showed a new step in the magnitude and capacity for multinational covert activities completely divorced from moral limits or even common interest other than profit. As this was going on, the U.S. was secretly funding an army comprised of lunatics to fight in Afghanistan. George Bush Sr. was the director when the CIA was preparing intelligence cells in Afghanistan and Pakistan to fight a proxy war with the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. These modern privateers were labeled freedom fighters. Hollywood boosted this narrative in Rambo 3, and it would be Bush Sr. again as president who commuted sentences and issued pardons for the Iran-Contra conspirators. You could look at Libya or Syria as additional examples. The U.S. paid off a bunch of Salafist jihadist religious nuts to go and do its fighting for them, and NATO did the air campaign in Libya. They couldn't do the same thing in Syria because of Syria's anti-air defense at the time, but they moved terrorists on the ground into Syria continually through Qatar, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia, multiple nations. The same Salafist jihadists they used in Libya were moved to Syria, relabeled the Free Syrian Army, and terrorized Syria for years. Each nation had a faction, but all of them were terrorists. Any actual rebellion within Syria was dwarfed by the foreign mercenaries. Over time, the Turkish-backed faction al-Nusra Front, now called HTS, prevailed. The leader of the group, Abu Muhammad al-Julani, worked with Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the leader of al-Qaeda in Iraq, to expand al-Qaeda's Syrian branch. The Zionist media is having quite the time trying to rebrand Julani as a moderate rebel. Of course, there was no al-Qaeda in Iraq until the US went into Iraq. These are known, real terrorist organizations, and the privateers were often real pirates as well. But there are portions of them, especially in the leadership, that are being paid off by intelligence agencies. And much of the money for this comes from the drug war, because it's hard to go to Congress to openly appropriate money to pay terrorist factions. Propaganda isn't designed to fool thinking people into believing something false. It is designed to give fools an excuse not to think at all. However, if you tell them you are financing terrorists, that is too on the nose. It is even better for the CIA to use capital laundered through foreign mediums. Illegal drugs is where they use the black market for black operations to pay off our privateers to hit targets without risk to their own soldiers. This is why on 9/11, it was so confusing and strange that the FBI, the NSA, and our different alphabet soup organizations were fighting internally with themselves to allow certain terrorists to live openly in the United States and blocking investigations into them because they were our terrorists. There is a look-away list for our own privateers. Khalid al-Midhar and Awaf al-Hazmi are examples of this, who had been used in the USS Cole bombing previously. Now it is up to you to think, did our privateers double-cross us, or was this the plan the whole time? You may ask, was that A, incompetence because our government is incredibly stupid? B, malevolence, they planned the whole thing and they're just geniuses and pulled it off like that? Or C, a portion of them knew what was going on, the majority of them stay in the dark. The faction commandeering everyone plays stupid. They surround themselves with dupes and incompetent people on purpose because they're easy to manipulate, and that is how our government works. I will go with option C. Here's a clip of Dick Cheney in an interview from 1994 about invading Baghdad, proving he knew exactly what would happen.
Do you think that the U.S. or UN forces should have moved into Baghdad?
No.
Why not?
Because if we'd gone to Baghdad, we would have been all alone. There wouldn't have been anybody else with us. It would have been a U.S. occupation of Iraq. None of the Arab forces that were willing to fight with us in Kuwait were willing to invade Iraq. Once you got to Iraq and took it over and took down Saddam Hussein's government, then what are you going to put in its place? That's a very volatile part of the world, and if you take down the central government in Iraq, you can easily end up seeing pieces of Iraq fly off. Part of it the Syrians would like to have to the west. Part of eastern Iraq, the Iranians would like to claim, fought over for 8 years. In the north, you've got the Kurds. And if the Kurds spin loose and join with the Kurds in Turkey, then you threaten the territorial integrity of Turkey. It's a quagmire if you go that far and try to take Iraq. The other thing was casualties. Everyone was impressed with the fact that we were able to do our job with as few casualties as we had. But for the 146 Americans killed in action and for their families, it wasn't a cheap war. And the question for the president, in terms of whether or not we went on to Baghdad and took additional casualties in an effort to get Saddam Hussein, was how many additional dead Americans is Saddam worth? And our judgment was not very many, and I think we got it right.
What he said is exactly what happened after the 2003 invasion. They knew this the whole time, but they presented it like a cakewalk that would be paid for by Iraqi oil money. That's not a screw-up. It's deception. If you think it's too complicated for multiple nations to get together and use mercenary groups to attack other nations, think again. Look at Syria. Look at Iran-Contra. This has all happened before. The U.S. has been able to kill millions using covert warfare. See here John Stockwell talk about the CIA's war on the Third World.
And we wound up creating the Golden Triangle, in which the CIA Air America airplanes were flying in arms to our allies and flying back out with heroin. We launched the largest, this is something that Jimmy Carter did, Admiral Turner brags about it, the operation in Afghanistan. Biggest single operation, I'm told, in the history of the CIA's secret wars. And sure enough, very quickly we produced the Golden Crescent, which is still the largest source of heroin perhaps in the world today. Trying to summarize this third world war that the CIA, the U.S. national security complex with the military all interwoven in it in many different ways, has been waging. Let me just put it this way. The best heads that I coordinate with studying this thing, we count at least minimum figure 6 million people who've been killed in this long 40-year war that we've waged against the people of the third world.
9/11 worked very much the same way. Al-Qaeda attacked the United States with the CIA's blessing, and it was covered up by the same intelligence agencies that created them to begin with. It acted as a pretext for the war on terror, which replaced the Cold War to justify all the massive military spending we've seen since, the erosion of civil liberties, and the rise of a despotic fascist police state. They wanted to secure Afghanistan to control the opium trade, which the Taliban had cut off. It's the Opium Wars 2.0, just as the British had done before. The U.S. can create mass mercenary armies and foster and utilize terrorist groups at will. After the U.S. pullout, the Taliban managed to cut down opium exports by 94%. Part of this may also matter less to the U.S. as the global narco rings have pivoted to fentanyl. But over 100,000 people were dying in the U.S. from the opioid crisis each year. That's like 2 Vietnam Wars every year. You see, if people die in war, there will be complaints, but when they die from drugs, people think, well, they did it to themselves, so who cares? There is a reason Al-Qaeda has never attacked Israel. A war on terror is endless profiteering. The U.S. was in Afghanistan for 20 years. The objective was never about winning, much less women's liberation or fighting for freedom. The whole point is to prolong conflict for as long as possible until they have a new theater like Ukraine. This is why the U.S. preaches a war on terrorism while simultaneously engaging in acts of terrorism itself. It doesn't matter if that's the slow boil by drones or the quicker boil by proxy forces. It could be MEK in Iraq and Iran, Jandala in Baluchistan, Al-Shabaab in Somalia, Al-Nusra in Syria, or the foreign aid rent governments which work in the same way as the privateer model, such as Al-Hadi in Yemen, Mubarak in Egypt, Museveni in Uganda, Paul Kagame in Rwanda, Sheikh Sharif in Somalia, Al-Khalifa in Bahrain, and so on. And of course, Hamid Karzai in Afghanistan. The U.S. began its Al-Qaeda Frankenstein back in the 80s by backing the Mujahideen and their mercenary special forces Al-Qaeda, and then the Taliban in their civil war. And then the U.S. changed sides on paper to the Northern Alliance, but in reality, it was just the CIA's occupation of the country for its own interest. The American government had a hand-in-glove relationship with Osama bin Laden while they were fighting the Soviets together. This privateer had a religious following and a lot of financial overlap with Saudi Arabia, who is used to finance all of the extreme Sunni Wahhabi terrorist factions. Al-Zawahiri was just as much of an influential privateer as bin Laden, but you never use all of your puppets' faces for the brand sold to the public. As Ali North infamously stated,
"The plausible deniability, we wanted to be able to deny a covert operation."
Plausible deniability. What he said here is so huge. Though the Iran-Contra operation in particular ended, and don't say to yourself, that was a long time ago, we don't do that anymore. That style of operation has been ongoing. There's a multitude of ways to launder money. Through other nations like Saudi Arabia or Turkey, through bogus NGOs, CIA-assisted narcotics trafficking, and fake foundations to create plausible deniability. Take the case of Fethullah Gulen, living in the U.S. as an imam, but in reality, to anyone with any common sense looking at it, he was just a transparent conduit who the CIA needed to funnel $20 billion worth of funds through to so-called Islamic schools and mosques, which were themselves fronts for training the next round of terrorists. It's a mixture of privateers and useful idiots. They finance the most radical imams and radical madrasas intentionally to farm the next generation of jihadi cannon fodder. The U.S. also backed radical Judaism. You see, the theology doesn't matter. Religious fanatics have a predictable outcome, and that's violence, and that's the goal. Having offshore methods of finance took away domestic scrutiny.
Yeah, and right there, we're about to get into it with the Saudi money laundering and on into Israel. This is just kind of the precursor to show you how these intelligence nexus work. And we're going to explain the banks and madrasas and with specifics, not in a general way. Which area, which people, where did the money come from? Where did it go? How they moved it around and how they were protected, how intelligence agencies had all of this information. They did not share it with each other, and they didn't act on it themselves. You can watch this whole film. RyanDawson.org is right there in the corner. RyanDawson.org. It's free. Free. And you can take that link and share it on whatever. I'm going to go look at Rumble. I don't think we have any questions. Nothing on Entropy either. Thought so. There you go. Empire Unmasked. There's a giant 3-foot by 2-foot map you can see behind me. It dwarfs the Epstein and Numek maps. And this is all on 9/11. I think it's like 175 names on this huge map back there. And we have the poster as well if you like it. Anthrax timeline. I mean, really, if you got all the maps, I could cover this whole wall with Epstein, Numek, the Biden map, Anthrax timeline, and the 9/11 map. We pretty much cover it all. So if you want to scare people, put that up in your garage. And quick funny story. I got interrogated in China because I had to go to, there were too many flights. And I had to go from Japan to China to Korea. They go through my phone. First pictures of Osama bin Laden, and then it's Khaled Sheikh Mohammed, and then it's Ramzi bin al-Shim and Zawahiri, and on and on. And like, what the heck is this? And I had to sit there and explain to them that I was a researcher and I made a film about the terrorist attack and had to go show them a clip of it and everything because it looked pretty bad. I was just about out the door when they find that folder. And I'm like, oh, hooray. You can imagine the other stuff on there too. I saw some cracked smiles in the meme folder, but there we go. And it all started here, givesandgo.com/9/11. Not allowed on GoFundMe, not allowed on Kickstarter, not allowed on any of that. This is the only one. This Christian site, Give-Send-Go, is the one that Kyle Rittenhouse used. You can still go there and donate. The film's been made, the map's been made. I would like to tour around with it, and I would like to basically any funding from here on is just going to get pushed over into the next film, which I think we're going to do. The Articutification is one possibility. I've already done a film on Syria. We do have a large section that was cut from this film on Iraq and Afghanistan that could be done. There's obviously the RFK and JFK assassinations, and then there's the Jeffrey Epstein, which would be a giant film. Those are the ones I have in mind. I wanted to do a short one on the Levant affair, but I don't know if there's public interest in it, but it's something that ought to be done. But there you go, Give, Send, Go. But you can watch this film right now, and you can watch Numek. Both are free on this website, RyanDawson.org. All right, peace. Get a map.